The first alert buzzed halfway through the father of the bride's toast, then another and another. A ripple of unease moved through the ballroom like a wind no one wanted to name. Crystal glasses paused midair. Heads turned. Phones lit up beneath tables and behind floral centerpieces. Whispered updates spread faster than the champagne. Is this real? No, it can't be. Skyline? Gone? They didn't see him at first, just a man at the edge of the room, hands folded in front of him, calm as a stone in a storm. While the rest panicked, he stood still, watching, waiting. Someone finally noticed. Who is that? And that was the question. Who was he? The man who had just collapsed one of the biggest companies in America. The man who had turned the wedding of the year into a fallout zone. The man none of them saw coming. Until it was far too late. Weddings at the Preston estate were rarely intimate. This one was no exception. It sprawled across manicured hills, a labyrinth of silk tents, champagne towers, and flowers flown in from 3 continents. The kind of excess that smelled like old money trying to outdo itself. Waiters in white jackets moved like chess pieces. A string quartet played Vivaldi under a chandelier suspended from a centuries-old oak tree. Table 19 was tucked just far enough from the action to be a statement. Staff overflow. I sat with the third-string planner, a florist's assistant, someone's dog walker, and a DJ who'd only spun the rehearsal dinner. None of us mattered. That was the point. I had a perfect view of the head table. Marissa, radiant, ruthless, held court in lace and diamonds. Logan the groom played charming, but his eyes flicked too often to his phone. And Richard Preston, father of the bride and architect of this spectacle, soaked in every second like a man feeding on legacy. He didn't notice me. Not yet. That was by design. They thought they'd buried me, buried the past, tied it up in NDAs and handshakes, paved it over with mergers and press releases. But some ghosts don't stay underground. Marissa laughed at something Logan whispered. Her hand lingered on his wrist. Calculated affection. She was always good at playing roles, especially the innocent ones. And Logan? Logan was a climber. Slick. Dangerous only in that hollow way people like him always are. Ambitious, incurious, utterly certain the world was built for them. But Richard was the real architect. The kind of man who built empires from shadows. Ruthless when it mattered. Smiling when it didn't. He taught Marissa everything she knew about power. And he taught me something else entirely. The first toast had just begun when the first alert hit. Skyline Holdings, bankrupt. A giant gutted. People started noticing then. The murmurs, the shifting glances, the sudden weight of silence between sips of Dom Perignon. I stayed seated, still, watching. I wasn't there to gloat. Or maybe I was. It's hard to say. But mostly I was there to witness the moment their world cracked. Because every empire falls. Eventually. And some just need a little push. I didn't raise my voice. I stood. That alone was enough. At table 19, a body moving unexpectedly breaks the pattern. Half the table turned toward me, puzzled. The other half were still scrolling, heads down, trying to make sense of the chaos unfolding in the digital ether. I stepped away from the table, past the service corridor, into the light of the ballroom. They noticed me then, not all at once. Perception spreads like oil, slow until it floods. Heads turned, one after another, as if some part of them could sense the center of gravity had shifted. I walked up the aisle between linen-draped tables and clinking glasses. I didn't touch the mic, didn't need it. The room had already begun to hush. "Logan Caldwell," I said. He turned. "I'm here to inform you that the supply contract between Skyline Holdings and Anseltech has been terminated, effective immediately." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't dramatic. It was a statement of fact, clean, surgical. A pause followed, like the whole room had forgotten how breath worked. Then the first phone buzzed. Another, then another. A wave of alerts swept the room like a current, running under every tablecloth and heel. Breaking, Anseltech terminates deal with Skyline Market. Watch Skyline shares plunge. Wall Street Journal. Skyline collapse looms, the ballroom fractured. The murmuring returned, but now it had teeth. People weren't just confused anymore. They were scared. Investors, board members, adjacent CEOs, all in their tuxes and sequins, realizing they were no longer at a wedding. They were at ground zero. Logan stood, eyes scanning the room like a man looking for an exit in a building already on fire. "What the hell is this?" he barked, stepping away from the dais. He'd found his voice, too late. "This is a correction," I said. He took 2 fast strides toward me, fists clenched. "You're bluffing. You can't just— This is a signed deal." "Was," I said. "As of 10 minutes ago, it's null. Breach of terms, regulatory findings, fraudulent reporting." The usual fine print. Marissa had gone pale. Her fingers gripped the back of her chair like it was the only thing holding her upright. She wasn't looking at Logan. She was looking at me. And there was something behind her eyes. Recognition. Richard rose next, slowly. The old lion, realizing the fence had opened and something bigger had walked into the cage. "You've made your point," he said, low and measured. "I haven't even started," I replied. The crowd parted now, not because anyone told them to, but because instinct told them something dangerous was standing in the middle of the room. Not violent, not loud, just inevitable. Security approached, nervous, young, unsure. I raised a hand. "I'm leaving. No need for theatrics." I turned to go, left them all standing there, churning in disbelief and status anxiety. Their world had changed in 10 sentences, and none of them had the language for it yet. The door closed behind me, but the sound of their silence, thick, stunned, full of falling pieces, followed me out. She found me in the hallway just outside the ballroom. The heels came first, sharp, fast, echoing fury on polished stone. Then her voice, low but laced with venom. "What the hell was that?" I didn't turn around. "Not yet." "You knew," she said. "You knew what this day meant to my family, what it meant to me." Finally, I faced her. "I did," I said. Marissa looked like a woman torn between grief and rage. The mask, graceful, practiced, expensive, had cracked. "You humiliated us in front of everyone." "I told you what would happen," I said, calm, tired. "For years, you just didn't want to hear it." She stepped closer. "Don't pretend this is noble. You waited until today because you wanted the biggest stage." "No," I said. "I waited until today because your father finally signed the final extension last week. That gave me the leverage I needed." Her jaw tightened. "You're not some avenging angel, you know. This isn't justice. It's ego." I leaned in, quiet. "You think this is about me?" "This was always going to happen, Marissa. Logan cut corners. Your father looked away. You all built your lives on rotting wood and sprayed perfume on the decay." Her expression faltered. Just for a second. "You're still so bitter," she said. "Still that angry little boy from staff housing?" There it was. The flash. The old wound she couldn't resist pressing. I laughed, just once. "You still don't get it." Flashback. Her father's voice, years ago. "The boy's clever, but he doesn't understand how these things work." Flashback. Marissa smiling politely as I handed her college application essays she asked me to review, then ghosting me for weeks afterward. "You're different," she'd said, "but you'll never really be one of us." Flashback. Me, invited to dinner once with her family, sitting silent through courses and condescension, every compliment laced with ownership. I stepped past her, but not before saying the one thing I'd been saving. "You never asked who I was," she blinked. "I was never your friend," I said. "I was your warning." And then I left her standing there, in her designer dress, wrapped in silence and champagne regrets, watching the empire she thought untouchable begin to crumble around her. Richard Preston found me just past the garden terrace. The air outside had turned thick, storm-heavy. Somewhere, a thunderhead rolled over the hills, silent for now but threatening. The kind of weather that made you feel like something was about to happen, even if it already had. He came alone. Of course he did. Men like Richard don't bring backup unless there's a camera involved. "You've made your point," he said, voice taut, jaw working overtime. "Now undo it." I turned to face him fully. "It doesn't work like that." He stepped closer, face flushed beneath his tan, his posture the same I'd seen 100 times at board meetings and gala podiums, a man who assumed the room would always bend to him because it always had. "You think you've won something?" he said. "You embarrassed my family. You crashed a wedding. That's a tantrum, not a takeover." I kept my hands in my pockets. "You think this is about you?" Skyline was rotting. I gave it a push. The market is doing the rest. He looked past me toward the ballroom. The buzz of panic inside had become a hum. Unmistakable. Unstoppable. Phones were out. Some guests were already leaving. Traders in tuxedos, scrambling toward exits like rats off a burning yacht. "You don't understand what you've done," he said. "No," I replied. "You don't." Behind him, security lingered awkwardly by the garden steps. Two men in earpieces and ill-fitting suits, looking at Richard like they weren't quite sure if they should be protecting him from me or the rest of the crowd from what was coming next. "Should we escort him out?" one asked quietly. Richard raised a hand but didn't answer. He was staring at me, really looking, for the first time in years. "You don't even work in this industry," he muttered. "I do now." That set something off behind his eyes. Not fear. Worse, confusion. That brief, terrifying moment when a king realizes the map of the world he ruled is missing entire continents. "I didn't sneak in, Richard," I said. "I walked through the front door." A beat passed. "You never bothered to ask who owned the keys." The words landed with precision, and I saw it, just a flicker, the moment he realized how long this had been coming, how much he had missed, how little he'd seen beyond his curated skyline and curated guest list and curated family. Inside, the screaming started. Logan had finally collapsed into a chair, white as bone. The DJ was arguing with a guest about whether to turn the music back on. Someone was live streaming. Everyone else was checking stock apps with shaking hands. Skyline was down 37%. Richard turned back to me. "You've destroyed a company." "No," I said. "You did. I just made sure the fall happened on a day no one could ignore." He stepped back, shaken, but still posturing. "There will be consequences." "There already are." He opened his mouth, but nothing came. Because there was nothing left to say. No threat in his arsenal could match what was already happening. This wasn't a vendetta. It was a verdict. I left him standing there, alone in his kingdom, listening to the walls begin to crack. And crack they would, loudly, publicly, and permanently. I didn't look back. No slow turn, no dramatic pause in the doorway, just a steady walk through chaos that no longer belonged to me. Behind me, the ballroom had become an echo chamber of disbelief. Gasps, arguments, half-finished questions with no answers. The band had stopped playing. Plates of untouched food sat beneath flickering chandeliers slowly going cold. People noticed me as I passed, not with outrage, not even fear. Recognition. Some whispered. A few simply stared. One man, an old hedge fund relic who'd once ignored me on a panel, gave a subtle nod, the kind men give when they've just learned something too late. I didn't need their approval. No mic drop needed. Truth amplifies itself. I moved through the marble foyer and out the massive oak doors. The estate behind me looked unchanged, pristine. But it was hollow now, like a stage after the actors have left and only the lights remain. Burning. Aimless. The valet rushed forward trying to place me. He glanced at the tablet, then at my face. Unsure. "It's fine," I said, pulling the keys from my own pocket. "I'll walk." I passed the rows of idling black cars, the line of white tents stretching like a mirage down the hill. The world was still spinning, but differently now. Tilted. Lopsided. Honest. Because here's the thing about power. Real power doesn't announce itself. It moves like gravity. Quiet. Unshakable. Felt long before it's seen. I wasn't a guest at that wedding. I never had been. I was the man who owned the building, and today I simply decided to let them see the deed. The market closed down 16% on Skyline before trading was halted. By morning, the board was in emergency session. Lawyers scrambled. Shareholders screamed. News anchors speculated. No one could find Logan. He'd vanished, likely somewhere without extradition laws and with poor internet. Richard's public statement came 24 hours later, full of the usual phrases: deep regret, unexpected developments, committed to stability. No one bought it. The empire had cracked, and the cracks were public, permanent, and expanding. Marissa came home 2 days later. The penthouse felt unfamiliar to her, like a hotel someone had redecorated in her absence. She stood in the doorway for a full minute, eyes scanning everything. Framed art, untouched champagne in the cooler, my jacket over the back of a chair. I didn't know, she said. I looked up from the window. You didn't ask. I didn't think you were capable of— Of what? I interrupted. Of building something? Of burning something? Of walking away? She closed the door behind her. Her shoes echoed on the tile like they did that night outside the ballroom. Only this time, she didn't charge toward me. She drifted, carefully, cautiously, as if the walls might collapse if she moved too fast. "We can fix it," she said. "PR, restructuring, something. It can't be fixed. We've survived worse." "You have," I said. "I just survived in silence." That hung there for a long moment. She looked away. "This wasn't about money, Marissa. It never was." She said nothing. "It was about being invisible," I continued. "For years, I sat beside you, behind you, beneath you. I warned you. I showed you. But all you ever saw was a shadow in your spotlight." Her voice cracked. "You were never a shadow." "Then what was I?" I asked, not angry, just tired. "Because you never saw me as an equal. Not really. Not when you let your father speak for you. Not when you chose Logan. Not when you smiled through every little slight like it didn't sting." You didn't mean to look away," I said. "But you did." She crossed her arms, shrinking. "So what now?" I walked past her to the desk, pulled out a small folder, neat, quiet, clinical. "I'm filing for separation." She blinked, like I'd spoken a foreign word. "I loved you," I said, "and maybe part of me always will, but I won't go unseen anymore, not even for you." She didn't cry. That would have made it easier. She just stood there, silent, watching. And for the first time, I think, truly, she saw me. Purpose. Establish emotional grounding and wisdom. The train station near my mother's house hadn't changed in 20 years. Still smelled like old paint and hot concrete. Still had the same rusted bench with initials carved into the wood. I recognized my own from a summer I'd wanted to be immortal. Her porch light was already on when I arrived. She always knew when I was coming, even if I didn't call. She opened the door with a smile. Not wide, not surprised, just warm. "Shoes off," she said, "and don't try to pretend you don't want tea." I sat at the kitchen table while she boiled the water, the same table we'd eaten at when the power went out, when rent was late, when birthdays meant homemade cake and radio music. "You look tired," she said, setting down the mugs. "I am." She nodded, no judgment in it. We sat in silence for a while, not awkward, just full. Finally, she said, "You always thought truth would make you rich." I smiled. "It didn't." "No," she agreed. "Truth makes fewer meals, but better company." I looked around the room. The fridge still bore faded photos and magnets from schools I never liked and jobs I never wanted. But sitting there, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. My mother never asked what I'd done. She didn't need the details. She just offered me tea and warmth and a place to breathe. And in that moment, I realized something. I hadn't come home to escape. I'd come to remember what mattered before the world told me what should. This was peace. And from peace, I could decide what came next. Purpose. Reversal of power. Poetic justice. Langford arrived on a Thursday morning, sharp suit, worn eyes. He waited in the lobby for 20 minutes before I let him up. I made sure of that. Power in the right hands isn't loud. It's timing. He stepped into my office, all charm and desperation. "I was hoping you might have a few minutes." I nodded. 12. He chuckled awkwardly, unsure whether I was joking. "I need help," he said, settling in across from me. "Skyline's remnants still have assets. If we restructure fast, there's a shot at salvaging value." I slid the folder across the table. Inside, pathways. Not bailouts. Frameworks. Harder, slower, clean. "You'll find what you need there," I said. "It's not free, but it's fair." He blinked, flipping through the pages. "This is surgical." "No shortcuts," I said. "Not anymore." He studied me. "Why are you doing this? After everything?" I leaned back. "Because this isn't revenge. It's a circle closing." Langford swallowed hard. He understood. And I wasn't the only one he'd have to face. Logan worked down the hall now. Entry level. Clean desk. Manual onboarding. He wore a name badge. He didn't recognize me the first time we passed in the elevator. Just offered a polite nod. That was enough. He showed up early, stayed late, did the work. No scandals, no favors. And one day maybe he'd climb again. But it would be slower. And this time, he'd know what the ground felt like beneath him. I stood at my window after Langford left, watching the city churn beneath clouds. No applause, no headlines, just quiet justice, long earned. The system didn't collapse. It reset, and I'd never needed to be king. I just needed to stop pretending I was still someone's pawn. Purpose, resolution, and meaning. I never wanted a legacy. That's the part most people don't understand. They think I played the long game for power, for recognition, for the plaque on the wall or the name in the press release. But I didn't care about being remembered. I cared about being understood. Now I work out of a smaller office, less glass, more books. I meet with builders, young ones, the kind who wear doubt like armor and think volume is strength. I teach them quieter things, like how to read a room, how to listen before speaking, how to let the silence do half the talking. I tell them, power isn't loud, it waits. And when it moves, it doesn't shout. It arrives with timing, with purpose, not to conquer, but to correct. They ask about Skyline sometimes, the fall, the wedding. I never deny it, but I don't linger there either. History writes headlines. I just hand out compasses. On the shelf behind my desk, there's a small black frame. Inside it, a folded card, edges a little bent from wear. Table 19. That card reminds me where I sat when I was invisible, when I watched from the margins, when I learned that distance reveals more than proximity ever could. It's not revenge, that frame, not a trophy. It's proof. That silence builds things too. That patience is power. That being overlooked is sometimes the clearest view of all. I don't miss that world. The galas, the deals carved in whispers over imported wine. It never really saw me, and I don't need it to, because now I build with people who know my name before they need my help. And when they ask me what I want from all this, what the end goal is, I give them the only honest answer I know. Clarity, not fame, not control, just the sharp, quiet truth of knowing who you are and never again needing permission to exist. That's all I ever wanted, and it was always enough.